Hello my friends and welcome back. Nazis made some crazy weapons, wonder weapons, and they made some big weapons. And you guys actually commented that I should watch Dark Docs. It's a channel that makes videos about these secretive missions and Second World War, First World War, unknown battles, all of that stuff. We're watching Dark Docs today, and turns out there's this crazy, weird Nazi tank. It's the biggest of the big. It's ginormous. It's a tank that doesn't use tracks, but rails. You have to build a railroad for this one. That's how big it is. Nazis were cuckoo. But yeah, it's called Heavy Gustav. That's what my son is going to be called. Because I'm very big. I'm 6'4", so my son will be Heavy Gustav. Alright. As always, before we go, we have Patreons. And we do have some Patreons who are as big as this Heavy Gustav. We have Ethan Bitsinia, yeah, he pledged kind of a big amount, so thank you Ethan, you are on the same level as the Heavy Gustav, my friend. We have George W. Morris, thank you for becoming a Patreon. Finally, we have Carpenter Mike 72, a fancy name, I'm sure you were born with it. Thank you for supporting the channel. If you want to support the channel, hit the Patreon link in the description below and support the channel. Alright, let's see about the Heavy Gustav. I got a name from my son already, huh? Heavy Gustav. Oh, it's big, look at it!
Schwere Gustav, Heavy Gustav, was the largest and most powerful gun used in World War II. Commissioned by Hitler to destroy the French Maginot Line, it was actually only used extensively in the siege of Sevastopol. Dismantled by the Germans before losing
Sevastopol. Sevastopol is quite far in Ukraine. Well, it's in Crimea as much as I know. And the gun only needs to run on rails to actually make it in Germany and ship it to Crimea back then. It's a huge work. Ooh, that's a lot of work.
In the war, this cannon was the heaviest piece of mobile artillery ever built and had the greatest caliber of any rifled weapon used in war.
How big is it?
Although it's
Wait, let me guess. 700 millimeters, that's what I guess.
20,000-pound shells could break through 7 meters of reinforced concrete. 500 people were needed to fire it, and about 4,000 were needed to project and operate it on the battlefield.
That's too much. 4,000 people who have one gun. The Maginot Line. That's the French defensive line that failed totally.
In 1934, Adolf Hitler already knew he would be invading France. The French, however, saw this coming early on and started building the Maginot Line, a row of fortifications along the Franco-German border intended to divert any upcoming invasion to Belgium, which would be protected by several divisions of the French army. That way they hoped to avoid replicating the damage and destruction of World War I to French territory.
That's funny because that's exactly what happened. Exactly like First World War. The defensive structure failed immediately, failed so miserably. Germans just went around the line. It's like you build this huge wall and the other guy just goes around the wall. Boom. Oh, I didn't think about that. The whole France had to surrender.
The fortifications included blockhouses, rail lines, and bunkers. The barrier was extensive and comprehensive, seemingly impenetrable. Due to this, Hitler was in need of a new, powerful weapon that could do what no other existing weapon could.
Kaboom! Alright, listen to me. Put this Heavy Gustav on the Bismarck, the biggest German ship and almost the biggest ship in the world. And maybe then it wouldn't have had sunk by the British. Maybe it would have won the battle if it had Gustav on it. It would shoot one shell and take down an entire ship with one shot. Genius, right?
The Oberkommando des Heeres, the German Army High Command, reached out to the Essen weapons producer Friedrich Krupp AG to commission a gun that could take down the forts along the Maginot Line in 1934. The main requirement was that the shells needed to go through a meter of steel armor plate, or 7 meters of reinforced concrete, from a significant distance to prevent compromising said weapon. Krupp engineer Erich Müller was put in charge of the project, and his estimates led him
7 meters of concrete. I don't know where do you have 7 meters of concrete, like full concrete, 7 meters. Even the bunkers and the heaviest bunkers don't have this thick concrete. So this weapon was overpowered, but I love it. I love it, and I feel bad that it. Of course, it's good that they didn't use it because it, you know, the more they use, the more destruction we have. But I would love to see it shoot. Demolition Ranch could get a hold of this weapon and shoot it for fun, for us, you know, for the viewers, for the militia. But I know they took it apart and it's impossible.
To the conclusion that this new weapon needed to be bigger and stronger than anything built before. Muller's calculations established that his team needed to create an 80-centimeter caliber cannon, capable of firing a 7-ton projectile.
80 centimeters, which is 800 millimeters. I said 700. Ooh, almost, baby, almost.
From a 30-meter long barrel. He expected the weapon to weigh over 1,000 tons, which meant moving and handling it would be a challenge. The Krupp team proposed twin sets of railway tracks to facilitate the movement of the cannon. Similar to smaller railway guns, the mount itself would only move the barrel up or down. Targeting the weapon would mean moving it along a curve in the railway line.
Oh.
They made plans for different calibers between 85 centimeters and 1 meter, presented in proposal to the Oberkommando des Heeres.
1 meter, that's 1,000 millimeters. That what? Make a nuclear weapon. We're talking about huge sizes here. It's too big. Like the Bismarck, like Yamato, it's too damn big.
Although traditional German weapons manufacturing practices meant that Krupp offered to make the first of these guns for free, with a price tag only added if more were required, the OKH made no official commitment to obtaining it. The project was on standby until Hitler visited Essen in March of 1936 and asked about the feasibility of building the massive cannon. After talks with Krupp, they began working on the design of an 80-centimeter caliber model. The plans were formalized and development began in early 1937.
Schwere Gustav.
Production on the Schwere Gustav commenced halfway through 1937. Although 1940 was set as a completion date, logistical issues with producing the massive sheets of steel needed pushed the date back. A test model was ready in late 1939, which Krupp sent to Hillesleben for testing. During the test, the guns were able to penetrate the meter of armor plate and the 7 meters of concrete with a single shot from high elevation.
Holy shit.
Testing was completed in 1940, by which time the carriage had undergone several modifications. Hitler and Alfred...
Right, you cannot turn the gun. You can only point the barrel up and down. So if you want to turn it like that, you put the tracks like that and you move it along the tracks. That's how you can use it. That's how unusable. It's stupid. You have to be able to turn the barrel.
Krupp met at Ruggenwalde Proving Ground in 1941 for confirmation of the Schwere Gustav's capabilities. The Oberkommando des Heeres placed an order for 2 of these cannons. The first commissioned gun was fired for the first time on September 10th from a makeshift carriage. It was then tested in Poland using the 7,100 kilogram shell at a distance of 122,080 feet from the target. The Schwere Gustav was an impressive weapon. The barrel was more than 100 feet long, longer than any other gun barrel at the time, and its body was bigger than any Allied or Axis tank. The gun was mounted on a chassis with 8 bogies that had to be transported along 2 parallel railway tracks.
Oh no. And you have to lay the railroad. Whenever this gun goes, there has to be laid railroad. Sometimes battlegrounds, as you could see in Second and First World War, a lot of mod makes it so soft you cannot even lay railroads, but you still need to use artillery, so this gun is just not practical in war situations. If everything is perfect, summer weather, you know, ground is hard, just build, we have a lot of manpower, just build the railroads, yes, then it's good. But Second World War was not like that, and First one also not like that, so this gun is just meant to fail.
The bogies gave the gun a total of 80 wheels. The shells themselves were taller than 2 soldiers stacked on top of each other, and weighed an intimidating 20,000 pounds. While this was necessary to pierce the barriers of the Maginot Line, it meant that multiple soldiers had to be involved in loading the Schwerer Gustav. The first gun was free for the German army. The second one, commissioned along with it, had a price tag of 7 million Reichsmark.
7 million. Estonian currency back then, which was crown in Estonia, crown, like a Swedish crown. Not the royal crown, but the currency, crown. Kroner, or how do you call it? Krone, whatever. Estonian krone was based on German mark. 1918, when we got free, we had German marks as a currency for a little bit before we have the ruble from the Tsar, and then we took the kroner, Estonian crown, which was based on its value on German mark. So 7 million marks, there's a small connection to Estonian currency back then. It's just a tiny bit of history for you.
The huge new German cannon was not ready by the time Hitler needed to break the Maginot Line, so his army had to take France without using it.
Which was
Despite
not
his
a problem.
previous belief that an extraordinary weapon would be needed for that conflict, the Germans took over France with relative ease.
Panzers and Blitzkrieg, that's all you need.
Because the German troops overwhelmed the defensive troops. Even though the original goal of the Schwerer Gustav had been accomplished without it, Hitler still wanted his new toy to be used in the battlefield.
New toy.
He saw the
Hitler.
siege of Sevastopol as an opportunity to use it and display its grandeur before his enemies. The heavy artillery unit E672 was sent to Crimea along with the railway gun. The train carrying the weapon itself was 25 cars. In early March, the train reached the Isthmus of Perekop, where it waited until April while the special railway for the gun was built. In April, the Schwerer Gustav was placed on the new tracks, going from Simferopol to Sevastopol.
Right, it has to wait a few months for the tracks to be built, and then the gun has to be assembled. It's so much work.
The gun was successfully used at the siege, its first time in combat. It took 5 weeks to get it into firing position, with input and assistance from 4,000 people.
Oh
It
god.
began shooting on June 5th, with 500 soldiers participating in the firing process. By the time Sevastopol fell on July 4th, the city had been destroyed. The Schwerer Gustav had fired 48 rounds. It shot at several valuable targets, including a munitions depot 98 feet underground that collapsed due to the shot.
Ooh.
The barrel ended up in a precarious state due to its continuous use since testing. It was sent back to Essen, and the gun received a spare barrel that had been kept in the train. Soon after the battle was won, the huge railway cannon was dismantled so it could be transported. The German army had it sent to the north of the Eastern Front so it could be used against Leningrad in a planned attack. The Schwerer Gustav spent the winter near the Soviet city. Before it could be used again, the attack was called off.
So it only saw battle once? That's a very expensive 48 shots.
Three additional versions were either built or planned after the design of the Schwerer Gustav. The second gun produced, and the only other one used in battle, was named Dora, after Erich Muller's
Dora.
wife.
You name the biggest barrel you have after your wife. Hey, my love, I'm gonna kill people in your name. I'm sure the wives thinks that is romantic. No.
Cost 7 million Reichsmark, equivalent to
7 million.
24 million US dollars in 2015.
It's expensive.
Dora was deployed to the west of Stalingrad halfway through August in 1942, but was not ready for combat until September 13th. Since the Soviets were about to encircle the Germans soon after, the German troops decided to retreat, taking the powerful weapon with them. The Langer Gustav was a second-generation cannon that was destroyed by British bombings over Essen while it was under construction. The gun would have had a 52-centimeter caliber and a 43-meter long barrel. Its shells weighed 1,500 pounds and could shoot from 118 miles away. This meant that the Germans could have shot at London all the way from Calais in France.
Whoa. Why do they need this? They developed the 1912, was it? The rockets, V2, I mean. The Nazis developed the rocket first in the world, and they bombed London with those rockets very accurately, actually. So I don't know why would they need this gun. Rockets are much less effort.
Third cannon was designed as part of a 1,500-ton self-propelled tank. The Landkreuz P-1500 Monster was supposed to carry an 80-centimeter caliber gun, 2 heavy howitzers, and MG-151 autocannons to target aircraft.
That's a tank that runs on tracks.
While some reports claim that the project was cancelled by Albert Speer before a prototype was made, others have claimed that the lack of evidence pointing at the development of this tank was just an urban myth. If it were real, and it had been built, the tank would have been 500 tons heavier than the heaviest tank ever built, the Panzer VIII Maus. After only limited use in the battlefield, the German army realized just how complicated it was to operate the Schwerer Gustav. One of the main problems was the huge number of soldiers needed to fire each round of ammo. This meant that all those soldiers would be focused on single shots, rather than playing multiple roles on the front. 2,000 people were needed to fire the Gustav cannon, the majority of them providing air cover rather than operating it. Additionally, assembling the 5 parts of the cannon would take around 4 days. Transporting the gun similarly required multiple days and several troops to avoid having the huge railway weapon being hit by a plane. Since movement was limited to specially designed tracks, difficult terrain made it impossible for transport, and the rails made it easy for Allies to predict German positions. Another major issue with Schwerer Gustav was the rate of fire. Since calibrating the cannon required several hours, it could only shoot about 14 rounds per day.
This is a pointless weapon. It looks cool, don't get me wrong, but it's pointless. Not practical at all. I mean, the Nazis were quite genius when it came to innovating technology, war technology, but this, no.
The last nail in the Schwerer Gustav's coffin was the high cost of producing its shells, which had to be deprioritized with the deeply invaded Germany and high demand for tanks. The Third Reich's army eventually decided to retire Schwerer Gustav for the last days of the war. By April 14th, 1945, the Soviet Union's Vienna offensive had been successful, and it was evident that American troops would soon be taking over the country. That same day, the leadership in charge of Schwerer Gustav decided to dismantle the cannon to prevent the Allied forces from capturing and using it. The weapon's ruins were found on April 22nd in a forest area near Auerbach and Chemnitz. After being studied by Soviet weapons specialists, it was sent to Merseburg and subsequently lost. Dora was destroyed on April 19th, and the ruins were discovered by American troops. Today, part of those ruins are housed in the Dresden Military History Museum of the Bundeswehr.
Oh, it still exists? I wanna see it. In Dresden, okay. Cool. See, this is what dark docs do. I like this stuff. This is a part of history that is not mainstream, right? It's these tiny bits of history that didn't change history, but it's really cool to know about it. That's what I like. That's why we are going to watch more on this channel. Thank you, my friends, for suggesting dark docs to me. Very cool channel. I'll watch more videos from them. Also, thank you for watching and supporting and getting the merch. You're amazing. And as always, my friends, until my next video, stay cool and bye-bye.